There are some topics in this world that just by nature make people feel a little bit uncomfortable. A lot of people don't like to talk about maybe their own death or plan their funeral before that time comes. Maybe politics makes you feel a little bit strange. You don't want to talk about that. For me, diet and exercise is a very uncomfortable subject. Maybe you have a good friend that you've noticed some disturbing patterns or behaviors in their life that lean towards abuse or addiction, and you don't know how to talk about that with them. Maybe you've worked for your company 10 or 15 years, and you've been offered a new job, and now you have to go in and tell your boss that's been super faithful and very good to you over all these years that you're leaving the company and going somewhere else. That can be a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe when your 14-year-old daughter comes to you and wants to talk about dating and boys. Terrible conversations. And it would seem that even within the church, there are some subjects that are very uncomfortable for some people. And giving is probably right there at the very top of the list. So we don't shy away from issues that Scripture teaches about. We believe that giving is a biblical principle. But usually because it's uncomfortable, we try to begin the message on a light note. So if you know it's going to be a heavy message, you try to make some jokes about giving to ease the mood in the room. Young Timmy was sitting in church one day, and his mom gave him a $5 bill and told him to put it in the plate when it came around. The time came, and there was the plate, and boy, he had the death grip on that $5 bill because he'd never had $5 before, and that was a whole lot of money. And he didn't want to put it in that plate, and the mom could see he was struggling with it. So she said, now listen, Timmy, you have got to put that money in the plate because that money is tainted. Drop it in. So he got scared and he threw it in. The plate went on by, and he looked over his mom and goes, why was that money tainted? What's wrong? Was it dirty or was it diseased? Is it contagious? And she goes, no, honey, that money taints yours and it taint mine. It's God's. There was a strong man who had a side gig. He worked at a circus, and he would stand out in front of the crowd, and he would take a lemon, and with his big, huge, burly hands, he would squeeze that lemon till it was almost nothing at all, and then he'd pull out a $100 bill, and he'd say, I got $100 for anybody that can get one drop of lemon juice out of this lemon after what I just did to it. And a very frail and sweet, mild-mannered elderly lady walked over, and she said, I think I'll give it a try. And she takes that lemon, and she puts the death grip on it, and she starts to squeeze it and gets a teaspoon of juice out of this lemon. He gives her the $100. Later, he finds her in the crowd. He says, ma'am, I just need to know, what's your secret? How'd you get all that juice out of that lemon? She said, lots of practice, sir. I've been the treasurer at my church 42 years. Two men were stranded on a desert island. They'd been shipwrecked, and one was worried and one was calm. So one is laying on the beach catching up some sun rays. The other one's just pacing back and forth, going, we are going to die, we are going to die. Nobody's going to find us here. We are definitely going to die. And he looks over at his friend and he goes, how come you're just laying there? Aren't you worried? He says, no, I'm not worried at all. And he goes, why not? He says, well, I make $25,000 a week, and I faithfully tithe to my church. And this month is stewardship month. My pastor will find me. That's true. Amen. So we make light of this area and we say, okay, we're going to talk about giving, but let's talk about it in a lighthearted manner. And Brother Ted was right. So often we think giving, we think, oh, that's just talking about money. Today's all about the pocketbook and the checkbook and only talking about the green. And giving is so much more than just our monies. So in the fall of 2018, we spent 6 weeks dedicated to stewardship. Dave Ramsey, one of the pioneers of stewardship education, defines stewardship as this: it is managing God's blessings in God's ways for God's glory. And so we looked at what does it mean to be good stewards. So today we're going to talk about giving, and hopefully not in a way that is uncomfortable, but in a way that we are going to look at a biblical principle and to make sure we understand exactly what giving should look like in our life. The psalmist tells us that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Therefore, God owns absolutely everything, and we are only managers. We are stewards, and God freely gives, and God also freely takes away. So we want to be good stewards. Is that an easy thing to do? Absolutely not. That's why it's called a discipline. So in this series on spiritual disciplines, we first looked at the discipline of prayer. Then we looked at Bible study and opening up our scriptures every day to read them. We looked at quiet time with the Lord, silence and solitude. We looked at worship. We looked at service. And now today we're going to look at giving. If you have your Bibles, turn to John chapter 6. We're going to look at verses 1 through 15 today. John chapter 6. Answering the question, why don't I give the way that I should? For some people, it's because of fear and laziness. Last Sunday, we had a beautiful worship service, had a great lunch. We went home, didn't have any plans for the day, a little bit of rest and relaxation before Monday hits you like a freight train. So everybody's quieting down. We're just going to have some time to rest, watch a show, be on your own. I go out into the back room of our house. I'm just getting ready to have a bit of peace. And the dog starts barking like a crazy dog. And that's not unusual. My wife's dog, if the wind blows the wrong way and the shutters flap, she thinks we're under attack. So she barks all the time. But then I look over there and she's doing this. So here's a picture of her, and she's barking at the underneath of the couch. I'm just going, what are you doing? I'm trying to relax here, and you're making a bunch of noise. So I did what any loving husband would do. I screamed for my wife, said, babe, come get your stupid dog. She won't stop barking. And so she just keeps barking and barking and pawing and pawing and barking and barking. And then look over and her position changes. Oh, Lord. So she's after something. So I sit there and I think about it for a minute. I'm contemplating. I don't know what's under the couch. It could be a bone. It could be the other red crock. It could be a piece of food. It could be a toy. It could be a really small robber, like a little bitty guy. I don't know what's under there, but I'm not really sure that I want to know what's under there because fear. If there is a king cobra under there, I don't want to have to try to wrestle that thing and get it out from under the couch. If there's an alligator under there, I don't want to have to try to get that out the door. If there's a rabid raccoon, it might run up and claw my eyeballs out. If there is a bat, I'm going to have to try to figure out how to catch it. I'm kind of afraid, and I don't want to know what's under the couch. And you know this image. I'm in my favorite chair with my favorite blanket. I'm about 25 seconds away from a sensational Sunday siesta. I don't want to get up. I don't want to mess with the dog. Whatever it is, it can stay there till tomorrow or at least 2 hours from now. It'll be fine. By that time, the whole family's in there. We've got to get a plan. Whatever it is, we've got to get it out. We can't quite tell. So I'm going to go over here on the right side, and I get to be the one that picks up the couch. Closest to the danger area. Thanks a lot, family. My wife's going to stand here in the front. She's going to have a broom. My daughter's going to be standing like over in this area, and she's going to have like this little gate thing, not to let it go in the house. My little boy's going to open the back door, and he's going to video record with his camera and his phone just in case something funny happens. So we go over there, and I pick up the couch, and I'm going, is it going to bite me in the leg? Is it going to run up into my face? What's going to happen? Because I can't see. And my wife's going, oh, my goodness. And that's all she's saying. My daughter's holding up this big wooden thing saying, don't let it come over here. And Sam's just video. So I got just a little snapshot of what came out from under the couch. It's not very clear, but you can see it. It was like a 40-pound puma cat. That's not our cat. I don't know where it came from. I've never seen it before. I hope we don't ever see it again. But it was under there, and obviously the dog knew all about it. So we get the cat. It runs out the house. Everything went back to normal, I guess. So I thought to myself as I sat there were two things that challenged me in that situation. I had some fear, and I had some laziness. And fear and laziness are the mortal enemies of spiritual disciplines. So we're going to jump into John chapter 6. Let me give you a quick recap of John 1 through 5. Remember, the Bible tells us a story. We read it as a letter. So you don't want to start in a book or in a letter 6 chapters in and not know what has happened so far. So John 1 through 5 looks like this, very simplified. John the Baptist prepares the way for Jesus. Jesus is baptized. He calls his first disciples. He does his very first miracle where he turns the water into wine at the wedding. He drives out the money changers out of the temple. He shares the gospel with Nicodemus, and he tells him that we must be born again, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him, they should not perish but have eternal life. He encounters the woman at the well. He heals the official's son, and then the lame man laying at the pool. And then the Jews sought to kill him because he was breaking the law by healing the Sabbath, and he was blaspheming by telling the world that God Almighty was his Father, and that's who sent him. Then we pick up John 6, verse 1. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. So after this, after Jesus spoke to them about who sent him and where his authority came from, this is when this began to happen. He travels over. We don't know how long there is in between there. The ESV says it could be anywhere from 6 months to a year. We just need to know that after this happened, this is what happens next. Verse 2. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. So this large crowd begins to follow Jesus, and John MacArthur says they're not following him because they believe in who he is. They're following him because they're curious. So this is that Jesus guy we keep hearing about. This is the guy that supposedly turned all that water into wine. This is the guy that healed all those sick people. Let's just follow him around. Let's see what happens. And it says Jesus and his disciples, they sit down. And it doesn't say what they do. Maybe they're talking about what's happened that day. Maybe they talk about what's going to happen the next day. Maybe they're just telling some stories. Maybe they're praying. Maybe they're just being quiet for a few moments. Verse 5. Lifting up his eyes then, seeing a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. So Jesus looks up. He sees this large crowd of people. And he says, "Hey, Philip, it looks to me like there's a whole lot of people out there that are following us. And I'm almost positive that they're going to be hungry. I wonder where we could buy some bread to feed all these people." And it says this is a test for Philip because he already knows what he's going to do. So in my mind, this is the image of Jesus trying to disciple the disciples, trying to teach them to think ahead, trying to teach them about how to meet ministry needs, to involve them in this process, and also to instruct them on the type of faith that they're going to have if they're going to see God's work in his kingdom come. This is the image of Jesus saying, I'm the teacher and you're the student. I already know the answer, but I want you to help me. What exactly do you think that we should do in this situation? Verse 7. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough even for each of them to get a little bit. 200 denarii would be 200 days' wages. So if you say an average wage is $40,000 a year, this would be like $22,000 worth of bread. That's a lot of dough. You get it? It's a lot of dough, like dough. It's dough. That's a lot of dough. So he's going, that's a whole lot of money. Even if we had all that, it would only be enough for everybody to have like a bite. And in my mind, I wonder if Philip sat down on the ground and began to do the calculations with his fingers. I wonder if he had a little piece of papyrus and some chalk, and he's going, okay, we got all these men here, and bread costs this many drachmas, and we have this many, $21,000. That's how much it would cost. 200 denarii, Lord. It would cost 200 denarii even to buy just a bite for all of these people. And so the expositors say that his answer was practical, yet it was unimaginative, because he only produced statistics of what could not be done. And I wonder if that's our problem sometimes when it comes to giving. How many of you have ever heard of a need in the church or in the community? Everybody, all the time. The big three when it comes to giving is time, talent, and treasure. That's the main three things that we usually focus on when we talk about giving back to the Lord. And so many times we see a need in the church, we see a need in the community, we see a need in our neighborhood, we see a need at work, and we say, I would love to do something about that, but I just don't have time. And I get it. I know what busy life looks like. You say, no, preacher, you don't know what busy life looks like. Let me talk about what my life looks like. Work, family, school, cook, clean, eat, bathe, Netflix, sports, band, 4-H, bunco, barbershop, bowling, and bed. That's a daily slow day. I don't have time to do anything, and I get being busy, But here's the truth, that no matter how busy you are, if you're working 5 jobs and have 7 kids, you still make time for the things that are important to you. That's a universal truth. No matter how busy you are, we always make time for things that we want to have time for. And I wonder if sometimes we see a need, we see something that needs to be done for the kingdom, or something that needs to be done physically in our church, in our neighborhood, our community, in our family, and we say, but there's so much that needs to be done, and it would take such a long time, there's nothing that I can do. See, Philip only saw the huge crowd and said, the need is so big, I'm afraid that we can't do anything about it. Or the need is so big, it'd be a lot easier to do nothing at all. And so we see these needs in our life, and we have this fear, say, what if I can't even make a difference because the need is so big? Or if I do step out there and I try to meet it, it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of time, and I just don't know if I'm willing to invest that much energy into it. And so sometimes we are fearful, and sometimes we are lazy. When it comes to our talents, we say, I know I have this skill, I know I have this ability, I know I have this spiritual gift, and I want to give to the Lord, but I don't know that I'm good enough. And the need is so great, it really requires somebody way better than I am. So I'm kind of afraid to even step out there and volunteer. And it would take a lot of time. It would take a lot of effort. It would take some planning, and it would take some coordinating. It'd be a lot easier to just be lazy and do nothing at all. And when it comes to our treasure, we say, look at all the needs. Look at all the missions. Look at all the projects. Look at all the souls to save. Look at all the seeds to plant. Look at all the buildings to build. You're talking about eating chest full of gold. I got like a chocolate coin wrapped in gold paper. I got so little. What could what I have possibly make a difference? Because the need is so big, I'm afraid I can't change anything about it. And the need is so big, sure would be easier if I just let somebody else do that. So we don't give our time, our talent, or our treasure, because sometimes, like Philip, we say the need is so great, I'm afraid to do anything, and doing nothing would be so much easier. And yet sacrificial giving of our time, talent, and treasure is never going to be easy. It's a discipline. I don't want to be hindered by fear. I don't want to be hindered by laziness. I want to give faithfully. What do I need to do? We have to have faith and learning. John 6, verse 8. So one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, says to him, there's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many? So Philip says, well, if we had about 200 denarii, if we had about $20,000 in today's money, we could probably buy some bread, but I don't really see any H-E-B's around here. There's no donut shops, and we don't have that much money anyway, so there's not a lot that we can do. What are some other options here? Give me another plan. So Andrew says, well, we have a couple of loaves of bread. We have a couple of fish here, but that wouldn't even be enough to feed us. Verse 10. Jesus says, have the people sit down. Now there was much grass in this place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. So we know that this little boy has 2 pieces of fish. He has 5 loaves of bread. It says that it was barley bread, so that tells us that he was poor, because poor folk ate barley bread. The well-to-do folk had wheat bread. We don't know how the boy showed up. We don't know if they saw him carrying a Dora the Explorer lunch kit and go, hey, he got something, let's see what's in there. We don't know if he overheard them talking about how we're going to feed these people, and he walks up and suggested. Or maybe let's get a call, hey, anybody got any groceries? And he walks up and says, hey, here's what I got. And so they look at these couple pieces of fish and the bread, and they go, how many folks are here? And it says there's about 5,000 men, plus women and children. So that could be anywhere from 10 to 20,000 people. I don't physically know what that looks like. I'm sure I've been in stadiums and concerts and football games that have had that many people, but I've never looked and been like, okay, this is 15,000 people. Here's a picture of 15,000 people inside of a football field. You have got to be kidding me. So you can imagine Jesus and his disciples sitting over there in the corner going, okay, we've got about 15,000 people here that are hungry. What are we going to do? Well, from where I'm sitting, if we had 2/3 of a year's wages, we couldn't buy a morsel for all these people. Andrew goes, hey, look, we got 7 things here on this plate, but that surely isn't enough. Verse 11. So Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. So he strategically sits people down. One, because if all these hungry people hear that there's a buffet line, it's going to be a madhouse. People are going to get hurt. So he sits them down in groups where there is no buffet line. And number two, he sits them down in groups so they can orderly be fed, and they might not even know where all the food's coming from, because Jesus loved to do miracles and never draw attention to himself. So he prays over these couple loaves of bread. He prays over this fish. They feed all the people that are there, 10, 15, 20,000 people, and they have 12 baskets that are left over. Preacher, I know this story. I've heard it before. This is the only miracle that is in all four Gospels. But what does it have to do with giving? I wonder how many times are we not faithful in the spiritual discipline of giving because we don't understand the definition of stewardship, nor do we understand our expectation from the Lord. So the definition of stewardship, everything that we have is not ours. It is the Lord's. Therefore, we are called to be stewards and managers of that. We are called to give back to him our time, our talent, and our treasure, but that often requires us to do so on a step of faith, which means that we choose to make time, we choose to use talent, we choose to give treasure. But preacher, you don't understand, I don't have a lot. That's okay, because God may not ask you for a lot. He may just ask you for what you have. The little boy had 2 pieces of fish and 5 loaves of bread. That's not very much, folks. And yet when he gave to Jesus, he did abundantly more with it than we could ever even think about or understand. And we have this misperception sometimes that if I'm going to give my time and my talent, my treasure to the Lord, that means that I must give a minimum of 25 hours a week. I must have a minimum of 5 professional level talents, and I must give a minimal of 75% of all the money I earn back to the Lord. That's the only way you can do it. I'm an all-in or an all-out kind of guy, and I can never give to the Lord unless I hit all these marks. And if the Lord calls you to give 25 hours a week, and the Lord calls you to use 5 professional talents, and the Lord calls you to give 75% back to him, you should do it, definitely. But for most people, that's not what he's asking. He's just saying, all I'm asking is to take what I have given to you and give it back to me when I ask. And when you do that, you don't have to be concerned about the results or what happens next. God doesn't call you to be his child, and God doesn't call you to be faithful because you're rich or you're overly talented or because you're bored and have lots of time in the world. He just wants you to be obedient because you love him. So in our time, we choose to give time to God. I don't have time. Listen, folks, I've seen your Netflix bill. I've seen you on your phone. And it's easy for me to say, listen, I don't have time, but if you have time to go to the gym for an hour and a half, if you have time to check Facebook an hour and a half, if you have time to watch your favorite show in the evening, you have time. But we make time for the things that are important to us. I don't have any talents. I'm not good at anything. The Lord may not need you to be good at anything. He may need you to show somebody else a bad example, but he's still calling you to be obedient. I don't have very much, neither did the boy. And yet what he had when he gave to the Lord fed 15, 20,000 people. Sometimes we see the need is so great, I don't feel like I can even do anything. Or I just don't know that I have what it takes. Well, what it takes is some faith and some learning about how to trust the Lord. Number 3, we also need to be finding and longing. In our house during spring break, we have what we call spring work. And so we do lots of projects during spring break and try to just do things in the house. We pressure wash, we paint things, work in the flower beds. So we have a porch on our back deck, and there was one section that had sunk down a little bit lower than all the rest of it. The wood had pulled apart just over years. So we take these boards off the front of the deck and we look under there, because nobody's ever been under there since we've lived there, maybe since like the Ark of the Covenant, I don't know. And so we're looking under there, and it's just full of dirt and leaves, and it's dark. And in my mind, there are terrible, creepy, crawly things all underneath there. So we spend at least 20 minutes with a rake just pushing things out of the way, shining lights, throwing fire bombs, making sure there's nothing under there that is going to attack us. And the area that we're climbing through, is maybe 2 foot tall. And so I squeeze through like Winnie the Pooh. And I get in there, and I'm getting to the back. My wife, she climbs in there. Just our feet are hanging out. And we're working on, we're raising up these boards. We're putting a little brace there. We're putting this in there. So we're getting it going. We're doing okay, but it's pretty slow. You're laying on your back. You can't hardly move. And I feel something on my leg. Now, I'm fully well aware that I'm a bit paranoid and overdramatic sometimes. So it's probably a leaf. It's probably just the dirt. I know that. But in my mind, I'm getting a little bit upset. So I said, babe, there's something on my leg. She goes, there's nothing on your leg. We pushed all the dirt around. There's nothing down here. There is something on my leg. So I turn, I look real slow, and there's a snake crawling on my leg. I'm not making this up. Now, in this moment, I did not have the gumption about me to try to pull my phone out and take a picture to show y'all. So I looked online, and I found one similar to what was crawling on my leg, and it looked something like this. That might be a little bit smaller, but there was a python. It was really like this. It was this little bitty baby snake, but we were yelling and we were screaming. So when we went under there, we were hoping to find nothing, and we did, and it left us longing to escape. When we give to the Lord our time and our talent and our treasure, we're going to find ourselves in the midst of God's presence. And it's going to leave us longing to stay there and to keep going back to that place over and over again. John 6, verse 12. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost. There is no waste. So they gathered them up. They filled 12 baskets with the fragments, the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, this is indeed the prophet, who is to come into the world. Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. 2 fish, 5 loaves, given to Jesus in faith. Thousands ate until they were full. 12 baskets were left over. The people saw what Jesus did. They said, from Deuteronomy 18, this is the prophet. This is the one. And Jesus goes, they're going to come and try to make me a physical king who will try to overthrow Rome, and now is not the time. And this is not my purpose. I want to be their spiritual king. I didn't come to bring physical freedom right now. I came to bring spiritual freedom. And so Jesus withdraws into the mountain. And one of the things I love about this image is that it was the boy who sacrificed all that he had, but the focus is not on the boy. It was Jesus who was there to perform this great miracle, and yet the focus is on Jesus. He slips away, but the stories of the Bible always point us back to never taking glory for ourselves, but always giving glory to the Lord. There were 4 options that they had here. Option number 1, they could send all these people home. Option number 2, they could try to find 200 denarii and buy some food and feed these people. Option number 3, they could take these 5 loaves of bread and these 2 fish and just feed that. Or option number 4, they could take what they had and they could give it to Jesus. There's a lot of options that we have, a lot of choices that we can make in this life. But if we want to learn how to be sacrificial givers, we cannot be limited by fear or by laziness. We have to choose to have faith and to learn to be good stewards. And every time that we give to God what he asks of our time, our talent, and our treasure, we're going to find ourselves longing to do that over and over again. Will it be easy? No. That's why it's called a discipline. But we ask the question, will you take the next step?